Church, hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, Fred Campus wants to, hey, all kinds of excited this morning. Want to welcome in our Niwot campus, everyone who's hanging out with us online. Thanks for taking an hour of your Sunday morning and being with us. We are continuing our series entitled Christian Shrieker. We're going to be in Ephesians chapter 6 in just a second, but I just want to remind everybody that I know very well that the summer is coming. The month of May for some of us is very busy. In fact, in the Cody house, we've got a kid who's graduating from high school in a couple of weeks. I know many of you have graduates, and so I say all that just to say, I mean, you're just going to clap for anything. Okay, look. No, it's good. No, we're super excited for our girl. And so here's the deal. We realize that we're busy people. We're in and out, especially as we get to the summer weekends. You're going to be traveling, vacating, all kinds of stuff. So I just want to remind everybody that if you're not able to be here physically on a Sunday morning, I want to encourage you to stay connected, stay engaged with us. We've got a YouTube channel for those of you who are over 65. It's this website on the internet where you can watch videos. And anyways, you can get on there. We got our whole service on there. All of our messages are on there. And so if you're not able to be here, if you're driving, listen, maybe listen to a message or just stay connected with us. Okay. So just do that. And so young people on staff say, get up there on stage and tell them to smash that subscribe button. All right. So just get on there and like the videos and subscribe. And that way you'll get notified whenever we post some new content up. Okay. So Ephesians chapter 6, if you haven't been with us the last couple of weeks, you should go on our YouTube channel. All right, you should go to our YouTube channel and catch up, because here's the deal. Paul, I think Paul here in Ephesians chapter 6, this might be, one of the most powerful, chapters in the New Testament. There's so much good stuff in here, and Paul, he's writing to the church in Ephesus because he knows that there's something at play here that oftentimes doesn't get talked about, and a lot of times that Christians, we forget, we miss it. And Paul's writing to the church, he's going, guys, listen, don't forget this. There's a spiritual battle. There's a spiritual war going on. And because of that, Paul wants to help. He wants to encourage the church and go, hey, there's some things that you can be doing to make sure that you can have success in this war. So this is what this whole series is about. So again, Ephesians chapter 6, we've read this verse all 4 weeks of this series. Here's what it says starting in verse 10. Again, this is Paul. This is what he says. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. So here's what he wants you to do. Verse 11, put on the full armor of God. You should put all the gear on that you've been given. Here's why, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. So Paul says, make no mistake, the devil is coming for you. It's not if he's coming, it's when. When is he coming and how will he be attacking you? And you may not have known that, or you may not think about that a whole lot, but he is coming. And part of the reason, again, why we're doing this series is so as a church in the followers of Jesus, we could be aware of that we could be mindful of that we could go, hey, this is a very real battle. And we face an opposition who is looking to kill you, to destroy you, to distract you. And Paul leans in, he goes, look, there are some things that you can put on that will help you withstand and to be standing at the end of this thing. This is why he says, verse 13, therefore, because this is a real battle with a real enemy, therefore you should, again, put on the full armor of God. So that when the day of evil comes, when the devil shows up, you may be able to stand your ground. And this is a major theme for Paul. And after you have done everything to stand firm then. With the belt of truth buckled around your waist. That was week 2. With the breastplate of righteousness in place. That was week 3. Verse 15, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. So don't forget this. Paul, he's writing this under Roman guard, And you just imagine he's sitting there and he's thinking about this war. He wants to encourage the church in Ephesus. And he's thinking, okay, well, what do these Christians need so that at the end of this battle, they will be standing? That's the goal, that they wouldn't get pushed back, that they wouldn't get pushed down, that they would still be standing upright. He's looking at this Roman guard. He's going, oh, yeah, they're going to need a belt. They're going to need a belt. We talked about it. And last week, Sean talked about, Paul's leaning in. He goes, they're going to need a breastplate. They're going to need something that's going to protect, their major organs. They're going to need to have something that protects their heart. And Paul's like, yeah. And then you get to this week, and Paul's kind of looking at this Roman soldier, and he begins to lean in, and he says, okay, now it's time. They're going to need some kicks. Again, for you older people, that's shoes. Okay, that's shoes. He goes, they're going to need some shoes, and shoes are going to be incredibly important. That's why, again, he says, look at verse 15, and with your feet fitted. So we're talking about shoes. Shoes that have been designed to fit you with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. So we're calling these the shoes of peace, the shoes of peace. Now, I'll be honest, I have a hate-love relationship with shoes, and here's why. Because when I was growing up, my mom, who's watching this morning, love you, Mom. My mom, we didn't go to, we just weren't really big on, buying expensive shoes. My mom was like a yard sale queen. You know what I mean? I just remember growing up, all of my elementary years, I don't even remember going into a department store and buying clothes or shoes. We just did it at yard sales, and that's just what we had to do. My mom did a great job doing that for 3 kids, and so that was just kind of the rhythm we did. But I wasn't the kid. Like I remember growing up, I wasn't the kid who had the Nikes or the Adidas or any of those kind of things. And up until middle school, it didn't even matter. It didn't even matter. You don't even begin to kind of understand this idea of kind of fitting in style till you get to middle school. And so I can just remember growing up, either we were buying our shoes from yard sales, or every once in a while we go to this shoe store, you may have heard of it, called Payless. Where are my Payless people at? You in here? Yeah, you know what I'm saying. You never know what you're going to get in there, And so that was just what we did. And so even just kind of growing up, had this, hate-love relationship, and I totally get it because, my staff knows this. I hate buying shoes. I hate paying for shoes. And if as a parent now, I totally get it because shoes are so expensive. So I totally understand why growing up, my parents just weren't willing to spend all that kind of bucks. But I remember the day that it started to change a little bit for me. All of a sudden, for most of my upbringing, I could care less about what shoes I was wearing. And then all of a sudden, there was a day I cared. And it was my 7th grade year, about a couple of weeks before 7th grade. I was going into middle school, and my grandma and grandpa, Mama and Papa, who are also watching from PA this morning, I love you guys. They took me school shopping, back to school shopping. And they took me to this store called Kmart, all right? And so we went to Kmart, and I remember, we're buying clothes, and again, I could care less about brands and style and all this kind of stuff. And so they said, do you need any shoes for school? And I was like, yeah, of course. So we went to buy some shoes, and they bought me what I thought at the time was the sweetest pair of Spaldings that I have ever seen. And we've got a picture of them. They'll come up. These Spaldings, young people are like, Spalding? I don't even know they made shoes. They made shoes and sold them at Kmart. And so I was just all in on these Spaldings. I just loved them, new pair of shoes, and to buy them from the store was a really big deal for me. So anyways, I start my 7th grade year, and the first week, I quickly realized that I was the only kid wearing Spaldings, okay? And I began to feel this tension. And if you're in middle school or high school, you even get this now, but you're just trying to find your people and find your place. And I couldn't find my people because nobody else was wearing these shoes. And so I just felt this tension, I was just so different than anybody else. And there's a certain point in your life where maybe that's a cool thing, but first year of middle school, it's not so cool. And then my middle school year just went crazy because 6 weeks into my 7th grade year, my father passed away. It's part of my story. Then a couple weeks after that, I'm back in school, and I'm just, again, feeling this, this is, for me as a 7th grader, this is such a big deal, shoes. I remember going home to my mom, and this is why my mom's so cool. It's why I love her. She would always get on my side, And I try to learn from these moments from her. But I remember going home to my mom and just going, Mom, my this is not good, She's like, what's wrong? I said, these Spaldings, I know, but nobody else has them, And I remember what she said. I can remember sitting at the dinner table having this conversation with her, and we just had dinner. It's like 6:30 at night, and she said, "Get in the car." And we got in the car and we drove down to the local sporting goods store. Walked in, and they had all the tennis shoes, sports shoes there. And she goes, "What do you want?" And I picked out my first pair of Adidas. I can remember what they looked like, and I remember walking into school that day going, "Well, what's up? I'm here. Look at these, And it just, I don't know. And you get this. I mean, shoes, they come in all, shapes and sizes, and shoes are designed for all different kind of things. And surely there's a bunch of shoes that have to deal with style, but there's some complexity to shoes. I mean, they look just, everyone's got different kinds and different flavors and different favorites. And so here's a couple here, all right? Here's a couple of shoes, just in the design of shoes, okay? So this, when I was growing up, these are the Reebok pumps, okay? You guys remember these. This is a shoe that was designed for basketball players or cool kids who could afford expensive shoes. And the whole idea was, like, you could be better. You could be better at basketball. You just had to figure out how many pumps you needed, you know? It's the stupidest thing ever. But we were like, yeah, you know? And so kids, I remember, you know, they had the pumps. And, you know, I'm just like, dude, that's so cool, you know? So that shoe's just designed, you know, to be cool and to potentially help you jump higher, which it didn't, you know what I mean? But that's how it was presented. That's the reason that shoe exists. Or you have other kinds of shoes that look very different. There's this shoe. This is a golf shoe, right? This is a golf shoe, and this is designed. It has some spikes at the bottom. It's designed to help you stay stable a little bit. In fact, guys, you know this, that if you don't play golf well, it's because you got a bad pair of shoes. You know what I mean? You probably got to go get some new shoes, you know. Wives, just, you know, humor them. Let them go get it. See if they play any better. I got a dad joke about shoes, so I just give it to you real quick. Just give it to you real quick. Okay, why did the golfer throw away his golf shoes? Because he got a hole in one. You know what I'm saying? All right. So you got golf shoes. You know, they're designed. They look very different than basketball shoes because the surface on which you're playing golf is very different than a basketball court, right? And then you got these kind of shoes. These are cowboy boots. I have no idea what they're for. I don't know what they're designed for. If you're like me, we can drive out to Fort Lupton this week and ask them. Try to figure it out, you know what I mean? And easy, Fort Lupton people didn't like that. Okay, so anyways, cowboy boots. You're a cowboy, you wear cowboy boots, and I don't know. I've worn them a few times. They're not very comfortable, and you can't run very fast. But anyways, there's cowboy boots. Then you've got, you know, other kind of shoes that are designed just specifically for comfort, all right, just for comfort. These are slippers, and some of you, you know, you get home, you put your slippers on right away because, you know, you want to be comfortable, and even more so in the wintertime, you just want your feet to stay warm. Or if you're like Amanda Verbaugh over the Niwot campus, who last week flew to Atlanta with slippers on, all right? I've never seen that one before, but showed up at the airport with her slippers, so maybe you fly in them. I don't know. I thought that was kind of weird. And then there's these kind of shoes. Like, these are pretty unique kind of shoes, right? Yeah, these are Crocs. These are designed to help you stay single, okay? Married people, you don't know nothing about these, but if you're single, and single people, listen, you get all upset right now, but just hear me out. Don't wear them for a couple of weeks and maybe you get married, all right? Just try it out. 2 of our younger people on staff this morning are wearing their Crocs. Both are single, all right? So just proves my point. So you get this. Shoes are designed for all different reasons. They come in all different shapes and sizes, but they're there to help, you know, kind of function in such a way to be a help to you and to your feet. So again, Paul, you know, okay, he's writing to the church in Ephesus, going, okay, you're going to need some gear, and and here's what he's doing. He's looking at these Roman soldiers' shoes that are very interesting. They're a very unique pair of shoes, especially 2,000 years ago. We got a picture of them. They're way ahead of their time. And they were called, you know, either Caliga or Calige, depends how you want to name it. But these were very unique to Roman soldiers. And the thing that really stands out is what's on the bottom of these shoes. These are like, you know, the first edition of like soccer cleats, football cleats. Roman soldiers, they would wear these shoes, and what the bottom of this is nails. They would put nails through these shoes, and they would act as spikes on these shoes. And so when Paul's writing says you should be fitted, you can see what he's looking at here. These shoes that go, hey, there's a proper fit in these shoes, and these shoes are designed really with 2 major focus points. The first one is to protect your feet. These shoes were made out of leather, and the idea was kind of offered more protection, more so than what an average person in that day, in that culture would wear. And so to cover the feet would be really, really important in the context of battle. But even more so than that, the most important thing is that this shoe would offer a soldier, especially in the context of a battle, mobility and stability. Because you can imagine these Roman soldiers, I mean, they're in hand-to-hand combat, and you know, they're out there in these battlefields, and it could be, you know, maybe they're on snow, or maybe they're in mud, but, you know, the conditions of war, it may present some difficulty for staying on your feet, but in the context of battle, falling would be a death sentence. So it was so important for a soldier in the midst of battle to have on a proper pair of shoes. And these were designed to keep them stable. These were designed to help them move in such a way in the midst of the battle that so they would be standing at the end of it, to stand firm. And Paul is writing to the church, and he goes, just like a Roman soldier needs to be standing in the midst of war, so do you. So go get fitted. Go find your fit. Go get those shoes that have been designed specifically for you. And this idea of standing firm is a major thing for Paul in the New Testament. He writes about this idea all over the place. 1 Corinthians, this is a letter Paul wrote to the church in Corinth. This is what he says, chapter 16, verse 13. Same idea, be on guard. Why? Because the devil's around. Paul goes, look, be on guard and do what? Stand. Stand firm in the faith. Stand. Be courageous, be strong. So stand firm in your faith. And if you're able to stand firm because you have the proper pair of shoes on, then you're going to be able to withstand the devil. When he shows up, you will have the proper shoes on. And again, none of this is a mistake. Paul is being, he's writing about every piece of gear that you should put on with a very specific purpose. Go back a couple weeks ago. There was the belt of, and it was all about truth. Paul goes, you need to understand what's true, it isn't true, because the devil's going to attack it. Last week, we talked about the breastplate of righteousness. Paul goes, you're going to have to understand why you have a right standing with God. It's very important because the devil's going to attack that. And then we get into, this week, and Paul goes, if you want some stability in your life, then you're going to need to put on shoes of, and the word he chooses here is peace. Peace. Which I think is great news for all of us because we've all had moments in life when we feel like all hell's breaking loose. You've had moments in your life where you're just going, I can't take on one more thing. I can't answer one more phone call. I don't want to see one more text. You've had moments in your life where it just feels like it's all falling apart. And Paul, this is what's so radical about this gospel. Paul seems to think that even in those moments, you can have peace. And here's why. Here's how. Because in most of the world, the word peace means the absence of war. Not so with the Old Testament word for peace, which is the word shalom. It's a little bit more than just the absence of war. Shalom kind of brings this idea of you're taking, war out, but then you're kind of bringing something. You're putting something in its place. There was something that wasn't quite right, and shalom shows up and goes, I'm going to make this right. It's a little bit of like Bob the Builder thinking. You ever seen that show? Can we fix it, Yes, we can. There's just something not right here. It's not how it should be. And shalom, peace shows up and goes, we can take care of this. We can make this better. We can make this right. It's a concept of wholeness or completeness, or we are restoring things to how they should be. Some pretty good shoes, So where do you go shopping? Where do you go shopping for these kind of shoes? Well, look again, verse 15. Paul goes, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. They come from the gospel. You've never heard that shoe store before, right? The gospel. Interesting kind of shoe because the word gospel means good news. A lot of times in church world, when we talk about, the gospel of Jesus Christ, we just say, the gospel is what we're saying is, in that word, we're saying we want to tell the story about Jesus. And this story about Jesus, and the reason why we use the word gospel is because gospel means good news. Here's why, you go shoe shopping, for these shoes at the gospel store. Here's why. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. Good news is about Jesus. This is why we can also talk about peace. This is a Christmas verse, but it applies. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of what? Peace. So Paul goes, look, church people should be rocking these church shoes because the one who designed it has everything to do with the church. It's Jesus. You get these shoes from understanding the gospel, the good news. which is why Paul says, this is Colossians chapter 3, verse 15, let the peace of Christ, let the peace of Jesus rule in your hearts, since as members as one body, you were called to peace. Major theme. Here's what he says, John 14:27. This is Jesus talking about his shoes. Peace I leave with you, and my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. So, God's peace is different than the world's peace. And you know this, because the world's peace, it comes in all different forms, but it only provides you with temporary relief. You know this. We could do a whole sermon series on this. Things that we try when we, these coping mechanisms, these things that we allow ourselves to be distracted by, and it relieves the tension and the fear and anxieties for a moment. But it always comes back. And Jesus leans into this conversation. He goes, no. You got a shoe problem. You're wearing the wrong shoes. If you would put on my shoes, you won't find temporary relief. You'll find relief in all its fullness. You will be relieved. This isn't what the world is selling. This is what I'm selling. You go into the wrong shoe store. But when you shop outside of the gospel for peace, you're putting on the wrong kind of shoes. Not so with Jesus. Paul leans in, Jesus leans in. It's a New Testament theme where they go, look, in this context of faith, if you want to be standing during and at the end of this battle, then you've got to put on these shoes of peace. And when you do, it doesn't mean there won't be war happening around you. This is where we messed up in our gospel, when we're presenting the gospel in the last couple of generations of church. Because here's what we said. You put these shoes on, there won't be a war. You follow Jesus, there's nothing ever bad going to happen to you. That's not the gospel. That's not it. It isn't that you put these magical shoes on and then your life is all kicks and rainbows, for the rest of your life. That's not how it works. Paul goes, no. Jesus goes, no. There's going to be trouble. The devil is coming for you, and he knows you, and he's got his ways and his tactics. And so here's what you're going to do. In the midst of this, because you just don't want to live this chaotic, anxiety, fear, worried life. Jesus goes, and Paul says, you should put on these shoes that you've been fitted for, that are going to bring you peace in some way and somehow, because of your faith and understanding about who Jesus is. In the midst of war, you can take deep breaths and breathe. If you've ever seen this, it's so incredible. Christians who find themselves in the most difficult situations in life, and yet they're not freaking out. What is that? That's peace. Paul would say they've got the right pair of shoes on. There's something from within that they believe to be true. That Jesus is who he says he is. That he actually died for your sins, and then he came back from the dead. And after this life, you will spend eternity with that guy. And they go, man, this is really painful right now. But this isn't the end. They take deep breaths. That even though externally it's falling apart, even though externally it's loud and chaotic and crazy, but internally there's a calmness, there's a peace, there's an understanding that this is not how it will always be. If you don't put on these shoes of peace, then you're more of a Christian streaker than you think. But if you do put them on, you get a new title. Jesus leans in and he goes, okay, if you rock these shoes, then all of a sudden I call you a peacemaker. If you put on the shoes of peace that have been fitted for you, you are all of a sudden called a peacemaker. This is what Jesus says. Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Jesus is preaching. He says this, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. You've got those shoes on. It's going to give you a little more stability. You're rocking a little bit more peace into your everyday life. Jesus goes, you're a peacemaker now. Your job is to bring shalom. Yeah, it's going to be a crazy world, but now you have an opportunity because you have the shoes of peace to bring a little more peace. Your perspective is a little bit different. This is why Paul, when he's writing to the church in Rome, says this, Romans chapter 12, verse 18. We should talk about this verse a whole lot more. It doesn't get a lot of play. You're going to find out why. Here's what he says. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at what? Peace with Everyone. Woo, we don't like that, do we? God, you're correct. You know, you make us courageous and you make us strong. Paul goes, that's great. You know what else you should do? You should live at peace. With who, Paul? Everyone. Whew. That's insane. I mean, imagine a world that strived to live that out. Better yet, imagine a church that would try. Live at peace with everyone. Woo-wee. Well, how do you do that, Paul? Keeps going, verse 17. He goes, look, don't hit back. Dang it. Discover beauty in everyone. Okay. If you've got it in you, he's like poking at you. You know, if it's not too tough. I mean, this is what he's doing here. If you've got it in you, get along with everybody. Don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. I'll do the judging, says God. I'll take care of it. Verse 20, our scriptures tell us that if you see your enemy hungry, go buy that person lunch. Or if he's thirsty, get him a drink. Your generosity will surprise him with goodness. Look at this. Don't let evil get the best of you. That's the tactic the devil's going to use. Get the best of evil by doing good. We got an 8-year-old paying attention over here. Thank you. Go buy him some shoes today. You know what I'm saying? 8-year-olds teaching us up in here, all right? How you respond, listen, this is what God says, what Paul says. How you respond to people who disagree with you, who hurt you, who hate you, who say mean things against you. How you respond to those people matters to God. Matters to God. Paul says, you know what you should do? You should hit back with love, because you've got the shoes of peace on. Now that is going against our culture. You hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you. You don't like me, I'm not going to like you. And then Paul goes, whoa! I thought you had them shoes with spikes on. No. You've been called to live at peace as best you can with everybody. Well, Paul, what if people hit me? Don't hit them back. What if they've hurt me? Don't hurt them back. Hey, where's the line here? Paul goes, no. If you see an enemy and he's hungry, you feed him. If you see someone you don't like and they're thirsty, give them something to drink. When somebody approaches you with evil, you don't respond to evil with evil. You give them something good back through your generosity. And here's why. Here's what Paul knows. They won't know what to do with it. They won't be expecting it. It'll actually help bring peace. That's the trick. That's the key. And somebody just thought, well, there you go, Matt. That's what I'm talking about. Because I always say, the most loving thing that I can do is tell somebody the truth in love. I hear that all the time. Well, how do I do that? Because I want to tell them the truth. And if they're not doing something right, or if I think they're sinning, or they're not living how they should, then I just got to tell them the truth. And they go, but I tell them in love. And anytime somebody says that, here's what I say to them. No, you're not. No, you're not. And we get into this conversation. I have yet to see somebody tell somebody in their context, I told them the truth, but I told them the truth in love. Because here's what that means. That means you approached somebody and you told them, you created tension, and you did it in such a way that when you walked away, the other person on the other side said, they love me. And that, friends, that is really hard to do. Not impossible, but it's really tough. And so odds are, most of us, if we've ever said, I told them the truth in love, they didn't hear the love part. And I just think it's a bad approach, especially if you're a peacemaker, especially if you got some shoes that give you some mobility because you got spikes in them and you're all about peace. I think it's a bad approach because I'm telling you what the other person on the other side hears. They hear something like this. Here's what they hear you saying. I want to show you how wrong you are and how right I am. That's what they hear. I want to show you how wrong you are and how right I am. It doesn't work because it puts people on the defensive. And when people are on the defensive, they stop listening. They're not listening to anything you're saying. And you're saying, well, I got to be true to myself. And I'm not telling you not to be true to yourself. I'm not telling you to change what you believe. I'm just challenging you to maybe have a different approach because you got different shoes on. That your goal is to find peace. Your goal is not to be right. And if you're going to be a peacemaker, If you're going to be a peacemaker, then you're going to have to listen to understand how somebody could see it differently than you. And the problem is that we want to be understood more than we want to understand. And most people, I know this isn't you, but I'm just saying, most people, they only listen long enough to begin to form their next argument. Not so with peacemakers. This isn't what we do. Peacemakers, they're incredible. They have the ability to hold two perspectives in tension and still care about the other person's viewpoint as much as their own. Notice I said care, not agree. See, some people are sneaky, and they show up every once in a while, and they go, Matt, see? You said, and I said what? I said what? I believe in truth. I also care about people. And I believe my approach in tension-filled conversations according to what Jesus says and what Paul says should still find its way to peace. I'm just not showing up, throwing, stuff all over the place and blah, 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 and God said. I show up and go, I love you because God loves you. I want to hear your story because I know our past has so much, influence in our present. Tell me your story. Hey, help me understand a little bit more about why you believe the way you believe, or how did you come to that thought? I have a different thought, but just, you're holding two tensions with care. And peacemakers, they just know. They know it's almost impossible to argue, your way to a solution or argue somebody over to your side, because the key to making peace is understanding, and the key to understanding is perspective. And when you have perspective, it's easier to love. When you have perspective, it's easier to serve. When you have perspective, it's easier to live more like Jesus. You know this. And sometimes, wearing the shoes of peace, here's what I think. Sometimes wearing the shoes of peace looks like walking a mile in someone else's shoes. I am so at peace with myself. I'm so firm in what I believe to be true. I know I'm righteous because God said so. I'll even wear your shoes for a little bit because I want to understand what it's like to be you. Going back to what Paul said, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 16, when he said, be on guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong. And then this is verse 14. We forget to read this one. Do everything in love. Be courageous. Stand firm. And Paul goes, but don't forget, in our approach, because you're rocking them shoes of peace, do everything in love. You don't respond with anger. You don't respond in violence. You respond in peace. If you got those shoes on, you're a restorer. Here's how it should be. The world is crazy, It's chaos. It's filled with people who are broken, who make mistakes, and they hurt, and they wound others. And here's how it should be. This is what Paul thinks writing to the church in Ephesus. He goes, guys, look. When we show up, when we get involved, it should not become more chaotic. It should become more peaceful. He's writing to this church in Ephesus, and I think, this is why I love this chapter, because I think, Ephesians chapter 6, and the church that Paul is writing to is very similar to even our church here at Rocky. This church, it's a very interesting church in Ephesus. It's filled with old people and young people. It's filled with Jews and Gentiles, people from all different backgrounds, all different beliefs, all different traditions, even potentially different worldviews. So diverse. And Paul's writing in, and he's going, guys, come on. There's a war going on, there's a battle, and you got to put on the right pair of shoes. And he knows one of the things that's happening for this church, that this church is not exactly very peaceful. Unity is not really abounding. There's some conversations that have found their way into the church, and Paul is leaning in. He's going, whoa. Whoa, you're talking about so many other things, more than you're talking about Jesus. Why? They're having major conversations about food, about what they could or couldn't eat because of their belief in Jesus. They're talking about circumcision. Ooh. There's a part of the church that says you can only be a Christian if you get circumcised, which if a Jew wasn't a big deal, but a Gentile was a very big deal. And they're arguing. They're pointing fingers at each other. They're having major conversations about, the gifts of the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues and the how and the why. And Paul goes, whoa, 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 whoa. Why all the chaos? Whoa, whoa, whoa. And this is what he's just so good. He leans in, he goes, guys, no, come on. You know why you're here? I mean, I can just imagine the church, and they're sitting there, someone's reading this letter to them that Paul wrote, And Paul's going, guys, you know why you're here? It isn't because of food or circumcision or speaking in tongues. You know why you're here? Because of Jesus. And because of that, this community should be the most peaceful community in the world. It is so peaceful that this is what you're bringing because you're a peacemaker and you're rocking these shoes of peace to the people in your community, in your workplace, and your neighbors. You bring peace because this is what Jesus brought to you. He's the prince of it. He's the shoemaker of it. He deals out of the store of the gospel. So what is all this that isn't very peaceful? And I just wonder, because this is not an easy topic. I mean, this isn't like go and do it, we'll be perfect at it. But I just wonder if the church at Ephesus 2,000 years ago struggled with that as much as we do. Then maybe our prayer this morning is simply, God, help us. That when the devil shows up, and he's so crafty, when he shows up, because somebody doesn't see it the same way I do, because somebody doesn't believe the same way I believe, and somebody votes differently or looks differently or talks differently, God, help us. That when I respond, when I make a move because of the shoes I'm wearing, I do so in such a way that strives for peace. And here's what I think. If we were a church that just tried to do that a little bit more this week, there might be a few more of us here next week. And if you struggle with this, I know a guy who sells these shoes. They're free for you. They cost him his life. And if you put them on because they've been fitted specifically for you, you will be a peacemaker. That internally you will have peace. And because of that, God will use you to bring peace externally to those around you. Paul goes, you should gear up. It's the only way you'll be standing at the end of this war. Let me pray for you. Father, this morning we thank you for the reminder. Help us to be people of peace this morning. That when we show up, when we kind of get engaged with the argument, when we respond to people who hurt us, that we lead with peace. That even though we can say certain things, we don't. That we think about our approach. As Paul says, as best we can, we should strive to be at peace with everybody, everywhere. So help us to practice that with those of us who are part of this church. And then help us to live that out with the people who you have given us influence with throughout our weeks. And may our peace lead somebody else to maybe find their peace in you. God, encourage us this week. Help us to be mindful there's a war brewing and there's an opposition who is looking to take us down. So help us to stand firm as we think about this gear you have given to us, as Paul has showed us, so that we may thrive in the here and now. We love you. We pray all these things in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. Okay, both campuses, 60 seconds. I know you're ready to go, but here's the deal. Two quick things. One, if you're new around here, we'd love to give you some more information about our church. You can text right now, one word, new to Rocky, to 97000. We're not going to send you anything weird or creepy. All right, just want to give you some more information about our church. We'd love to get to know you and give you the opportunity to get to know us a little bit as well. And our registration is open for Shine Prom. That's going to be happening in the month of September. This is a prom that as a church that we put on for people in our community with special needs. This is a highlight of the year, and we are looking for some awesome volunteers that would be willing to be a date. We call them buddies for our guests. And so we've got a table, both of our lobbies, of people who have volunteered in this role. If you've never done this, you should. I'm just telling you, you should. We totally get it that there's a little tension there because that opportunity might be a little scary to some, but I want you to know if you choose to jump in, you will be blessed for it. They got a bunch of information. I'm going to encourage you to stop by there. And if you're willing to go ahead and sign, we love you. More importantly, God loves you. Have a good week. Go do some shoe shopping. We'll see you next Sunday.